So good morning to all of you. Grace and peace. It is truly a joy and a privilege to be with you all this morning. I know that most Sundays you are usually listening to my brother Pete here in the pulpit, so as someone who has known him since he was born, I can honestly say, I feel for you. I really do. I get it. We can talk after if you want. Actually, I'm sure it comes as no surprise to the regulars here that when I'm not preaching someplace on a Sunday morning and I'm looking to hear a good and thought-provoking and deeply faithful sermon that will nurture my own faith, I often tune in remotely to worship here with you all. Hopefully he's not watching right now because I'll never live it down, but I'm very grateful for the invitation to be here today because Pete is not only my little brother, but also the preacher I'm always most eager to listen to. And so I'm also very grateful to all of you for being the faithful and serving and vibrant and loving community that he and his family call home. I come to you this morning from the Presbyterian PCUSA churches east of New York City, and I bring you greetings from those congregations. It's a gift to be connected to you all as part of our Presbyterian expression in the body of Christ, as well as to be a colleague in ministry with your Presbytery staff here in Hudson River Presbytery. One of the best parts of being Presbyterian is that we're never alone. Companions within the steadfast presence of God, we learn and we wrestle and we witness and pray in community, both intimate and expansive, embracing the vastness and diversity of Christ's fellowship. In my role as a presbytery leader, I spend a lot of time thinking about the future of the church. Often it's in the context of specific worshiping communities, some that are asking questions about how to be the church when everything else is changing so fast, some that are dreaming and imagining, stepping out into new ways of being, some that are looking down the road and wondering if they'll have enough people or enough money or enough energy to keep things going for another 10 years or 5 years or 2 years. Some that are just consistently persistent, serving one another and their communities as they always have been. Some that are finding it hard to have hope about the future of the particular church that they love. Most congregations, some mix of the above. But I also think a lot about the future of the big capital C church, the church at large, that messy, grand cacophony of Jesus' followers birthed at Pentecost that somehow became both a countercultural way of forming community and a behemoth institution that we now feel very anxious to preserve in all of its mainstream culture-ness. I think about the future of the church and the Great Commission. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. And the way that that commission led ordinary people in several churches where Pete and I grew up to take time to teach me about Jesus and to show me what it meant to follow. And I think also of the Great Commission's frequent distortion by the obsession we too often have with church growth and endowments and membership that frequently occupy our conversations far more than discipleship. I think about the future of the church and its significance in bringing a moral voice to the public square, and also, as Dr. King wrote from a Birmingham jail, its ineffectual voice with an uncertain sound, at least from those of us in the main line who have become, because of our positions in society and our economic comfort and our access to power, again, to borrow Dr. King's words, arch supporters of the status quo. I think about the future of the church, and I wonder what future generations will say about us, the stewards of the church, the transmitters of the faith, the disciples of today. By faith, by faith, by faith. This is the drumbeat in the 11th chapter of Hebrews that began in early verses you heard last Sunday with a rhythmic, steady storytelling of some of our tradition's great stories and ancestors: Abel, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses. A couple of sentences about each reminding us of the faith given to them by God and their faithfulness, even in all the mess of their life stories. But by the time that we get to the portion in today's lectionary reading, the writer has gotten a little more brisk in their rhetoric. The storytelling condenses, and eventually we get just a list of names and a catalog of all these terrible things that people endured because of and through and by faith. The drumbeat has quickened, and we understand that God's history is a long history, the entire course of history, the very beginning and the very end, and here we all are in the midst of it, just like all those ancestors in the faith, trying to figure out how to be the people of God. And the pacing of this passage in Hebrews suggests that that's an urgent question. Perhaps some of you all saw the movie Sinners earlier this year. It's a Ryan Coogler film about Black spirituality and music and transcendence that's set in the terror of the Jim Crow South. It's also a gut-wrenching supernatural horror film, just an FYI in case any of you decide to go watch it, that contains, by pretty widely shared opinion, one of the best single scenes in a movie in a very long time. I'm going to summarize it the way that Dana Stevens, who was writing for Slate, described the scene. About midway through the movie, the main characters are on a dance floor of a juke joint that's just been opened by two brothers on the outskirts of Clarkdale, Mississippi in 1932. The young cousin of the brothers, his name is Sammy, he sings and plays the blues. His musical gift is so special that it places those who hear it under almost a kind of spell. And as Sammy is playing on this particular night at this juke joint where Black residents of Clarkdale can come and find community and joy, something mystical happens. We see on screen, interspersed among the dancing locals who have come there for the evening, a West African traditional storyteller and musician in a tribal dance, out of time and out of place, and a Jimi Hendrix-style electric guitarist whose time in 1932 had not yet come, and both are seamlessly integrated in the pulsing music. A trio of break dancers appears, and a DJ working his turntables, and a ballerina, and others mix in with the movie's characters on the dance floor. And as Stevens describes it, the camera swirls through the crowd as these figures and their fellow partygoers in the Depression era come together in a trans-historical explosion of rhythm and movement and joy. This extraordinary sequence is a visual manifestation of the countless musical and cultural bloodlines that flowed into and out of the great Black art form that is the blues. Over this completely transfixing scene is a voiceover narration that says, "There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true It can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past and the future. Remembering this scene transformed my encounter with the 11th chapter of Hebrews this time around, and its drumbeat of rhetoric growing ever more energetic and breathless by faith, by faith, by faith, until the writer lands us on the dance floor of our present in and among this great cloud of witnesses, past and future. Memory becomes key to both past and future. It roots identity and culture, as well as hands off generationally both the joy and the struggle. I'm a little hesitant to misappropriate the themes of this film to show, make a point in a sermon, especially since one of the sins in the movie, if not the sin that it talks about, is the stealing of the power of the music. And this movie locates liberation much more squarely in the juke joint than in the church. We should really think a little bit self-reflectively about that, by the way. But there's something to be understood here, something to remind us about the weight of responsibility when we take our place among the witnesses past and present. Something that awakens us to the urgency of our witness. Something to help us take seriously how everything is changed when the veil between life and death is pierced. As one of Sammy's musical mentors in the movie says to him, "What we do, it's sacred and it's big." So then again, I think about the future of the church and wonder about that responsibility. Wonder about what future generations will say about us, the stewards of the faith, today's disciples and witnesses of Jesus Christ, who pierced the veil between life and death. Because although we are but dust, God has chosen over and over again relationship with humanity. And so what we do, by God's grace, it's sacred and it's big. The writer of Hebrews recounts some of the trials that our ancestors in the faith faced. Escape from slavery in Egypt, torture, imprisonment, death. Here in the US, we are so far removed from that reality, it's kind of hard to imagine as the church. Today, our discipleship, our witness, comes with very little risk. Our expectation is that the church is a place where we find safety and peace and comfort, all good and holy things, to be sure, but not the fullness of Christ's call to the church. And yet, despite the institutional protections we have, it seems that we're still held back by some kind of fear. We don't really love each other because we're too busy being afraid of each other. We don't stand in solidarity with poor and oppressed peoples to resist the powers and principalities of this world because we're afraid of taking the risk to speak or act or upset. We don't notice always what God is up to in solidarity with people outside of our walls because we're afraid of letting go of the idols we cling to within our walls. We only give the time and the money that is comfortable because we're afraid of experiencing discomfort. We don't act like the church of the God of resurrection because we're too afraid of what might die. But given the persistence of the powers of sin and death in these days, we cannot be timid in our witness. There's simply too much at stake. The divine caretaker of this vineyard world of ours expected justice, but saw bloodshed, righteousness, but heard a cry. The drumbeat has become more urgent. The great cloud of witnesses, past and future, are gathered, and already ahead of us is Jesus, who endured the cross. Who endured the cross, and who calls us to follow, with all the assurance of safety and peace and comfort we could ever need, that God is with us and for us, and never leaves us alone. What then will they say about us? When we've run the race and we've come to the end and we're standing among the great cloud who proclaim Christ crucified, what will they say about who we were and what we did as the people of God? What will they say we risked for the gospel, for the vital witness of the church, for our neighbor near and far, for the one who is afraid or hungry or without a home? What will they say, to borrow the words from our Book of Order, that we were a community of faith, entrusted to God alone, even at the risk of losing its life? Will they say, by faith, Presbyterians on Long Island, by faith, Presbyterians in Scarsdale, by faith, by faith, by faith. Amen.